Morning everybody, hope you all had a lovely weekend. This week's assembly, as you can see, is on World Space Week and it starts from the 4th and it ends on the 10th of October. Before I tell you a little bit about Space Week, I thought I'd just go over the definition of what space actually is, just to remind ourselves. So outer space begins about 100 kilometres above the Earth, where the shell of air, or what you would call our atmosphere, around our planet disappears. Now, with no air to scatter sunlight and to produce a blue sky, what we see as space, it appears as a black blanket dotted with stars. So there's no oxygen in space, so that's why space astronauts have to wear their special helmets. And a cool fact, if you were to scream in space or land on the moon and scream, because space is a vacuum, the sound would instantly get travelled away and you wouldn't be able to hear it. So that is what space is. It's all the area above and around us. A lot of people think that space is empty. So between all the planets, the stars, the moons and everything like that in our universe, it's not actually empty. The space is massive and vast, but it's actually filled with huge amounts of thinly spread gas, dust, radiation, and cosmic rays, which were all left over from the Big Bang, which scientists believe is where our universe began. So space is a mysterious and dangerous place, which is why astronauts are specially trained and equipped to go there. So what is World Space Week? World Space Week is the largest space-themed event on Earth. So everywhere across the globe, people celebrate Space Week. It could be museums doing exhibitions or schools like us doing assemblies and workshops on it, but it's a worldwide thing. So it's a celebration of space, science, and the technology that improves the conditions for humans to live with on Earth. It always starts on the 4th of October, and this is because that day marks the day of the launch of Sputnik 1, which is this machine here. It's the first artificial satellite which was launched around the Earth. This year's Space Week theme is Satellites Improve Life, so we're going to be talking a little bit more about satellites and what they do. So what is a satellite? A satellite is a moon, planet, or a machine that orbits, which means goes around, a planet or a star. So we have natural satellites, which is like our moon, or we are a natural satellite on Earth, which goes around our sun, our star, and some are man-made. So this satellite here is an artificial satellite, and that is the International Space Station, which is actually the biggest artificial satellite that we have. Astronauts go up to space and they actually live for a short amount of time on this space station. But natural ones and then artificial ones, those are the two different sites. So a little bit more about artificial satellites. Did you know that there are thousands of human-made satellites up in the sky right now? Sometimes at night time, if you look up, you can see a little dot that's moving across the sky. That's normally a satellite. The first was called Sputnik 1, which we already looked at, and he was the first artificial satellite which launched on the 4th of October in 1957. This was over 60 years ago. It started the great space race between the Soviet Union and the USA. So both of those countries were really trying to get their scientists together to get up in space first. It was launched into the atmosphere by the Soviet Union, so this is Sputnik. It was launched by the Soviet Union, and it was 58 centimetres in diameter. It orbited for 3 weeks before its batteries died. Okay, so what do satellites do? Let's read a little bit of information about that. So we've got, again, two different types of satellites here. The one on the left-hand side next to me is GOES satellites. Now, the GOES stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. Mouthful, that one. They orbit around the Earth around 35,900 kilometres above the Earth's equator, and their speed matches the rotation of our Earth. So they stay in the same place. So as our Earth moves, so do they. And that makes them really, really good for short-term weather forecasts and storm tracking. So if ever you turn on the news and you know what the weather forecast is, these type of satellites, the GOES satellites, they help us gather that information. On the other side, we've got POES satellites, and POES stands for Polar Operational Environmental Satellites. They orbit from the north to the south over the poles at a height of around 833 kilometres, and as the Earth spins, the view is always different. So they have a search and rescue instruments that help save lives. These are the ones that help save lives. They can monitor animal migration and predict where forest fires may happen. So they're a bit more free moving around and see all different types of images from all over the Earth. Okay, so other types of satellites. There are loads of other satellites as well as the two we just looked at. Some move quite close to the Earth and can be used by the military for checking the weather. And some satellites even orbit other planets. For example, looking for water on Mars or capturing close-up photos of Saturn's rings. So I'm actually going to show you a short video in just a sec, which is about a satellite that was launched to go and orbit Saturn. Let's have a little look. Okay, this is when we need to stop that. Okay, so moving on to how do satellites get up there? How do they get up into space and they orbit us or orbit the planets? So they travel into space using rockets. They orbit the Earth at different heights, speeds, and along different pathways in order to avoid collisions. So they're very specific about where they're going to be sitting up above us so that there's never a collision with the satellites when they're passing. Although it doesn't happen very often, in 2009, 2 communication satellites actually crashed whilst in orbit. Satellites are carefully tracked to try and avoid this happening. So although they try and plan it so it doesn't, obviously mistakes happen. In 2009, 2 of them crashed. Okay, so how do we use them for Earth? So a couple of examples. Getting directions on a smartphone. If you've ever used a smartphone, you want to know where you're going using the maps, Google Maps. Satellites send down the information to your phone to be able to do this. Also checking the weather forecast. So scientists collect the data from the satellites, which then they can report to us about what's coming on the weather. And checking how long a journey will take. Everything like that, kind of planning journeys and things like that. Satellites help us get that information. Also, scientists will use them for monitoring wildfires, volcanoes, and the smoke direction. They use it for watching space for dangerous rays from the sun or passing asteroids or comets. So they don't just use it looking at our planet, they also use it for looking outside as well to try and keep us safe. And down here we've got helping emergency workers respond to natural disasters. So it helps get the information to them quickly so that they know where to go and how to respond. And also seeing how the climate is changing. They use that quite a lot, so you can see pictures from a few years ago from the satellites compared to pictures now, and they can see the difference in how the climate has changed and what the landscape is looking like. So finally, at the end of this assembly, I just want you to go away and have a little think about these things. So with your class and your teacher, I want you to please discuss what else do you think that we use satellites for? And also, why do you think they are important? So that's just a little class discussion that you can have with everybody. Let me know some of your best ideas, email them to me, I'd love to read them. But thank you very much for listening, guys. Have a wonderful week. And if you feel like you want to learn a little bit more about Space Week, feel free to get online. There's lots of links that you can follow.